Not a good start, is it, when Simon's yawning before we even kick off?
David was yawning too.
Yeah.
Was I?
You yawned first. I yawned because of you yawning.
Welcome, peer fans.
Well, we're ready when you are.
It's very gentlemanly of you, David. Taking my time preparing myself.
Some scales.
Yes, scales.
Pretend to be a modem.
This is all your things, Russell. I don't.
Okay.
Randomly scream out loud.
Do you want to pretend to be a cow?
Or a dog.
Or a dinosaur.
Welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers podcast. Today we're going to be speaking about quality and what that is. Tonight I'm going to be joined, as ever, by David Maynard.
Hello.
Russell Craxford.
Hello.
Simon Pryor.
Hiya.
And I'm Chris Armstrong. Before we kick off, we want to just say a special thank you to our sponsors, Saffron QA. They've been with us for a long time now, and we're really happy to have them on this journey with us. Saffron QA are a specialist in testing recruitment, providing a range of bespoke recruitment services to organisations across the UK. For more details, please visit the show notes or saffronqa.co.uk. So before we dive deeply into what quality is, I was wondering perhaps if somebody had some fine banter for us.
I've got a question for you, and it is linked to our topic for the night. I was just wondering, when you think of quality, and I'm not thinking tech here, what companies jump to mind and why do they jump to mind? What brands do you think of? When
There's the
think
Marks and
of quality?
Spencer adverts on food, isn't there?
Yes, that's true.
This is no ordinary lasagna. You know, I was going to say, I would resist saying Apple just because that's kind of what they're building their brand on.
Yeah. The obvious one would be Apple.
Yeah, exactly.
That is all, it's the whole package, isn't it, really? But that's what that was their branding on.
BMW,
Why BMW?
because their cars are expensive.
Does high cost mean quality?
It can be perceived to be so.
How about then? Just be awkward. Aldi.
Hey.
Actually, what was the supermarket that had quality at low prices? Was that Sainsbury's?
That has to, wasn't it?
Or was it?
I don't know.
This is priceless banter.
this is amazing. Let's turn that around and go, what do you consider to be bad quality?
Well, yeah, that was my next part of it.
Oh, sorry.
So you've jumped ahead. What was it that resembles quality, and why does that give you the quality? I guess you kind of answered that. But yeah, on the flip side, when you think of low quality, we've got to be careful here that we don't say something on the podcast that gets us a bad name for dissing some brands. But
Well, I've had low quality service before from someone, and that gave me like a negative bias toward that company. It was an internet service provider whose name shall be redacted, but our internet went down and it was slow and there were lots of problems. And for 3 out of 4 weeks during a month, we had no internet at all. And as an apology, they offered us a £5 credit on our account, to which I said, no, that's an insult. And they said, for, goodwill, have another 2. So the minute I was able to go to another internet service provider, I did. And I did not return to those people because their service and the way they handled their bad quality service was terrible.
very good. Sometimes bad reputation because of doing that can lead to us assuming bad quality as well, which I guess they're not quite the same thing, but one does kind of link to the other.
I would say that sometimes cheap does come across as low quality. If you buy things too cheaply, you were saying about BMW or buying more expensive things. Sometimes buying more expensive things is a folly because actually you can get very good quality in the sort of middle ground. But I would say sometimes, or quite often, buying cheap does not necessarily mean quality.
Yeah, it does sometimes feel like you're compromising on the quality. Yeah. You're accepting that you're not going to get the best, but actually you're going to pay less for it.
And you have to accept that risk. It's an element of risk in that respect. But also, at times in our lives, we all have had monetary woes or whatever, or have to go cheaper. And that's an acceptance that hopefully there will be better times ahead and we can then afford something a bit more and better quality.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking about what we were talking about before, the quality of service and the quality of product, they combine often. It's not just one or the other, it's the combination of both. To David's point, yeah, there's a certain cost to creation of anything, materials or anything, or goods. And just because it's charged at £3 billion doesn't mean it cost £3 billion to make. So the price you pay doesn't equate to quality. And not always the price of making it does it either, because you can waste a lot of money doing it. It's rarer to get an exceptionally good thing made for pennies than it is to get something you pay a fortune for. They're not equal. It's not causation between the two.
Agreed. Thought that was a nice lead in, but quality then. Does anyone have a nice definition of what they believe quality is?
It's a 7-letter word. Begins with a Q.
How many points is it in Scrabble?
Depends where you place it. Context.
7-letter word, isn't it?
You can put it on a triple word score.
50 extra points.
Many thoughts. I guess Jerry Weinberg's one is always the one that comes to mind. Quality is value to some person. That's kind of one that always comes to me. So it depends completely on the context, and it depends on your perspective, and it's figuring out who that perspective is that matters, which then takes me slightly on a sideways jaunt towards sort of Michael Balcon and James Back. But it's about an opinion, really. It's not a fact, about how well something services a need. And internet provider, the need there generally would be getting internet. So it's how well you get internet. And obviously, if it's bitty, it's poor quality, in my view. And if it's constant, it's of a higher quality. That's my 2 pennies worth.
I think for me, quality does tend to link directly to customer satisfaction as well. If you're developing something of quality, then your hope would be that the customers perceive that quality as well, which is why I went with the questions I asked earlier, the brands and the perception. And quality has to be something, like you say, Russell, that means something to somebody, and that somebody probably is going to be the customer or the end user, and you want them to perceive quality in what you're delivering.
Yeah, I think the end customer should be the one we focus more on in terms of the definition of quality. It's often hard in testing because they're not the people that judge whether a bug is a showstopper or not. It's normally someone in the project, not the consumer.
I always think that when designing a product or software is to try and aim for the best quality. There are always obviously factors involved with that as to how much money and cost and time. However, we should always aim for the best that we can do in the time available to us and for the money available to us. If we aim incredibly low, so a good example is that if you're going for a run, if you aim only ever to do 5K, you can get to 5K and you'll be able to smash it. It'll be fine. Whereas actually, if your aim is to just go out and run, you might end up doing better and actually going further. So therefore, you don't aim for a particular point, see where you get to, and you might be surprised by what you can do. And it's the same with quality. If you build in quality early on and make sure that its thought process is part of the build, then actually you can get a better quality product out of it for the same money that you actually, and the time that you're putting in.
It's an interesting word, quality, because we use it all the time. This is quality. That was a quality goal. I had a quality dinner, quality assurance. It's a word that's thrown out. Quality street. I mean, that's gone down in perceived quality over the years. When we talk about quality, it's perception, right? It's not just how it's perceived by us who are involved in the making of something, because we've got more information. We know how it could have been or how it should have been. We know how well it was built or not. We know some of the dirty secrets or tech debt. Our perception is different, perhaps, from that of an end user. But that of the end user isn't just that product in their hand. It's also the information that surrounds it. So it could be what other people are saying about it, or what comparable products or other things they've had or seen before, and how that informs their perception of what is a quality product. So, for example, when I got my first car with electric windows, I thought this is a quality feature. But somebody coming into my car who'd had a BMW beforehand would have thought my car was, as we used to call it, rinky-dink, really low-key, not good quality. It's perception, it's context, but it's also achieving the goals that it was set out to do. We normally in software, we're creating something to meet a need, solve a problem, or if we've identified something we could do, we try to do that. So is perhaps meeting a need or solving a problem, is that perhaps a definition of quality?
But going back to your car scenario, the perception of quality with the electric windows is what you could afford at the time. So if you had a variety of vehicles that were only £500 or whatever, and one had electric windows, you would go for that one because that is perceived to be better quality because you're getting more for your money than ones that have the wind down windows. But people with BMWs, if they've got a middle of the road BMW, there might always be a better BMW that they consider to have better quality because it's got heated seats or it's convertible or whatever. So the perception of quality can be within a brand as well as between brands as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it always leads me back to the comparison I've used in the past in discussions when talking about quality with the business. And it's the discussion of you have two apps. One app meets all the requirements that were set out by the business. It's been tested to the nth degree. No bugs are left, but no customer likes it, compared to the competitor, which customers love, but there's a lot of bugs in it. Which one is perceived level of quality? The customers love it.
Depends what you define as bug.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there is that.
If you have a product or something, it's the initial customer expectation or the customer experience. You know, if you're opening a box and the way that you open the box, if you open the box and then you've got instructions, so many televisions or whatever now have the quick start guide, because actually at the end of the day, you just want to switch the television on and actually watch a program on it. You don't want to press all these buttons and have all these things and have to read a 100-page manual in order to do it. So that it's the whole experience. So that sort of starts it off. And then once you actually got the product, then like Russell said, if it doesn't have glitches, if it boots up straight away, it doesn't do things like that. But also, as we've discussed before, it's the perception if things go wrong in that initial environment of that relationship, if something goes wrong, what does the customer do? You know, so much through this COVID time, so many companies have closed down their ability to phone help desks. You find it's incredibly frustrating that you can't get through to someone to speak to. You have to go by emails and we'll get back to you within 72 hours. I haven't got 72 hours. I want to do this then. So it's a whole journey. We are responsible for the product or the software or the app or whatever, but there is a lot of environment around it that has that perception of quality.
And that's a really good point, actually. That was a world that I was less aware of until 2 or 3 years ago, because I was working in an internal product team for a global cybersecurity company. And the point was that we were delivering our little bit. And that was all we cared about. We weren't seeing the bigger products. But when I've moved into the commercial world, you're right, it's that whole process. It's not just about delivering the website or delivering the app or delivering the product. We have to make sure the quality is there afterwards as well, once it's live, once the quality of service from the customer support is in place, so that customers can get issues resolved quickly, questions answered. But that means also when we develop a new feature in the system, we have to train the agents who are answering to the customer's questions to make sure they know about it, so that they can answer the questions that customers might have. I don't know anyone anymore that doesn't only look at the quick start guide of any piece of tech they get. I certainly have it. Any tablets, PCs, phones, etc. What's the quick start guide? Can I turn it on, play with it? I don't want to read like you say, David, a 20-page manual. So people have moved to that point where it's a lot more, they're impatient, they just want to get on and do it. Everything has to evolve with that. And that's where quality has to be able to evolve with everybody else as well.
I think you're right. I think quality has evolved into, one key aspect of it, the usability, speed of usability. People perceive now that they can use it very easily. Also, people perceive that they can access anything on the web, they can access it on the phone, and it'll work equally as well on those things. People's presumptions of what quality is evolves by their experiences, by marketing, by behavioral sort of changes in sort of society. There's all sorts of different things that drive our perception of what quality is. And it's interesting to kind of see the kind of the behavioral stuff behind the scenes that actually drives those perceptions and how people do it. We talked about Apple. I've met a lot of bugs in Apple. I do not see their products to be brilliant and perfect, but the way in which you deal with it, when you have a problem with your phone, go to the Apple Care, the whole collective holistic services that go with that support mechanism, they are well tuned, I think our phrase, at dealing with it, and that helps with the experience. And I think a friend I saw had an issue with the Samsung battery on their phone. It failed or was not charging properly. They spoke to somebody. They had a van come out to their house. The guy literally took the phone into his van, had a look at it, said, yeah, there's a fault with the battery, fixed it, gave it back to him. And that was kind of the service level that those products do. Now, the product failed. There's no question that's a problem with quality. Because of the service level on top of it, that was no longer a negative. it was a much higher positive. Sometimes the fact that failures happen is how you deal with them. So if you look towards the modern sort of concepts of continuous delivery and those sorts of things, it's about responding to failure over trying to prevent sort of failure, trying to prevent quality issues. It's going to happen. But if you can make yourself faster at responding, the perceived value of quality will grow, whether there's problems or not. That happens on the journey.
You're right. A lot of, I think, quality is a relationship with perceived risk as well. There's always a risk of something going wrong, and your ability to respond to that definitely has a big impact on perceived quality. When we talk about how we perceive quality of something internally, our relationship with risk and how we deal with that is something that as testers we can be really frustrated with. We might see something, so for example, a release is going to go, but we've been blocking it because of things that could go wrong. Oh, it's too big a problem, we can't do that. But then suddenly you hit a hard deadline and it's just release it, and you feel like the quality has been compromised somehow. When we talk about trying to do quality activities first, it's how can we influence those things? And David, you talked about that earlier, and trying to have quality things earlier in that, and how we perceive that and influence that as testers. I know we'll touch on that in the future, but I have released, but I've also worked on products that we've released that I haven't been proud of the quality of the product. I have been with other products. And as an employee, you're supposed to be pumped and psyched and say, yeah, this product's amazing. If you don't feel that way about your product, that's not a good sign. And you want your company to do well, and your salespeople could be amazing and your service people could be amazing. But if your product isn't, you could still fall down. Like it's a real fine balance of a whole bunch of activities. I saw that Dan Ashby talks about quality being usefulness, goodness, and correctness. On a Twitter thread, I saw Ben Dowen add a little line in the context at a point of time, because in testing and quality, it's always context and time, right? We've talked about the end user being important, but I do think it's really important that we as people who work with that do see and are happy and content with that as well. Like I've often said, testers, we're here to not just be information givers, but having that gut that we have about things and that level of confidence in a product, because confidence is quality as well, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to be able to articulate that, though, haven't we? That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that also, as part of that, we are representing the end user as well. Part of our remit is to recognize what it is that the end user, or the experience that they're actually having. And as part of that, I've released products before where and I think we might have mentioned this on other podcasts, sometimes multiple minor issues are as frustrating as one major issue. And so therefore it's highlighting the number or frequency of those minor things that may cause irritations and therefore a perceived lower level of quality that is important to the stakeholders.
Do you think a lot of this comes down to how we measure things then? Because we've talked about how we measure bugs, right? That's some class 1 bugs that are big. And we talk about there's loads of little tiddly bit bugs that aren't really important. But the perception might be a big bug isn't such a big problem because it's not really used by many people, whatever. And are there ways that we can measure quality that aren't just around numbers of bugs or net promoter scores from our customers?
Yes.
Indulge me, Russell.
Go on, Russell.
Oh, we didn't ask for answers. More.
Oh, this is my follow-on question. Indulge me.
I think there is. I think we use math, we use statistics, we can do analyses of different sort of bugs and the criteria and the impact they have. We can do a lot more sort of with data these days. I think that gives us power. I think it also is dangerous, as with all power. We've got to be careful how we use it. I think we've got to use all the different heuristics that are out there to help us understand the impact of an issue. Monitoring systems is a great way of doing that. You can tell whether someone, like I worked for an accounting application, let's say the amount of invoices that were getting created dropped by an abnormal amount. That would tell me there's a problem, and that would tell me that, okay, there's maybe no major issue, but some of the other things are having things. Customer feedback, sort of portals. We used to have a Slack channel that actually any customer feedback that was inputted for the product would go straight to our development team, and they could quickly delve into little things. And just they do it when they were in 5 minutes downtime, often just to, what's that about? But you've got lots of different mechanisms. It's not just bugs.
Yeah, I mean, analytics, especially for web-based stuff, being able to follow the analytics of how many times people are taking particular paths through the software and noticing when things suddenly change. And there's like Russell said, there's a drop. It's a good way of realizing there's stuff to look at there. Bugs can't be the only thing, and they shouldn't be the only thing. There has to be other ways, and it's finding the right thing that gives you as a company the confidence and the comfort that you're doing the right thing and you're ensuring that you're releasing with the highest level of quality. But that does kind of lead me back to one of the modern testing principles, which talks about how the customer is the only one capable to judge and evaluate the quality of the products.
I see. I thought you were going to talk about the data one.
Well, we're talking about quality.
Use data to improve what we do.
That's a given there. What are your thoughts about the number 5 that I've just mentioned? Do we feel that the customer is the only one that can really judge the quality? I think for a large part, they're the one, the perceived quality is what the customer sees.
I think they're one of the best people, but again, it doesn't define who the customer is. The customer is many different people. So if you're a consultancy, the customer is the person paying for your product off you, as well as the person that's consuming the product. So I do think the terms make it very accurate. Yes, I think the customer is the only one, but that customer can wear many hats.
And also, it doesn't speak to a product that's in sort of an early inception phase, because all those activities go before it ever goes before the face. And if you spend an awfully long time doing something before you can get that judgment of quality, that could be wasted time.
Collaboratively looking at things from day one. Absolutely. Everyone on that team.
It also doesn't speak to the customers you don't have, or the customers that don't access you because of various reasons, be them edge cases or accessibility areas, or customers in an area you'd like to go to, but you can't work out how to get there.
So I notice none of us have said that quality is conforming to specifications or requirements.
That's some good. It's important box ticking.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Russell.
It's important box ticking, and in certain regulatory environments, that is a means to do those things. But I wouldn't personally call that quality. I might call that conformance, compliance.
Yeah,
and those things are important. But I guess consumers these days kind of expect that stuff's going to happen, regardless of whether it's not.
Well, I would argue that they don't care if it conforms to specification. They care if it works.
They probably expect if there is any sort of legal or data or something, they kind of just expect that thing is kind of taken care of, because of that's kind of the way legislation has gone these days.
Yeah, I think the big one there is obviously GDPR. People now assume that data is going to be handled in the right way, and it's then up to the software vendors and the providers to ensure they comply to those standards. But that's something that equally there needs to be a level of compliance testing on there as well to ensure that we're complying with those standards. But does that impact the quality? I don't know. I guess if it's found out that data has not been handled in the right way, then it impacts your perception. It impacts the customer's perception, and then the customer's perception of quality may go down as a result of that. But I still think compliance and quality are two separate things.
There's a heavy link between, if you're not confining to the law, then I would find it very hard to describe your product as quality. But it doesn't mean it is quality.
There's a fine line, isn't there? So
there is.
You might not necessarily be against the law. However, if you can fly close to the wind, so therefore you're not breaking any laws. I mean, a classic example is the Volkswagen putting the tests, the emissions. Has that dented the potential quality of the perception of the product, because they, in a certain scenario, they were reporting better than others? It's an interesting conversation. They may not have broken the law, but they're flying close to the wind, and so therefore the perception of quality is not quite right, because they're muddying the water and creating a smokescreen.
Well, that's also true of things like those special boxes that can get you access to paid for content without doing it. What they've done is they've identified a need, and they found a quality way for an end user to find the things that they want at a high quality streaming level for them to watch them. That goes against the law, but meets the need. Now, is that a quality product, despite the fact it conforms to laws or not?
Oh, that is interesting.
It's a tough one.
Depends on your context.
You see?
There we go. That must be a phrase you say every episode.
If you're happy to break the law, then it's quite wonderful. If you're a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah.
The context thing is important, because we talk about quality being something that is a removal of friction as well, like something that is the removal of that jarring aspect of something. If that goes, you think, this is a better quality thing. I spoke about it before, talking about it being something it can be intangible. You know what it is when you experience it, but you can't always put it into words. So I know that I'm experiencing something quality now, this time with you guys. Thank you.
I thought that might be the beer. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, the beer is done. That's sad. It could be just as easily, you could reflect on something, or something changes in my context. And maybe my perception of what is quality today won't be tomorrow. Or maybe I've been tricked into thinking something's quality, like the VW thing, because I thought I had the stats to back it up, and it's not.
And actually, we've mentioned it at the beginning, quality is a time and place. You can buy something and you think, this is the best quality. And the next day it breaks and you think, oh my God, that's really useless. And so it can change with the context of what you're doing it. Even if someone, if you buy something and someone else then goes, why did you buy that for? That's not good quality. Immediately it sort of dented your thing. So you may well be looking for things to qualify whether it's good quality or bad quality. It's an interesting sort of idea.
I think it's really interesting how things impact that quality, especially how it can be manipulated by lies, by marketing, by just where things are placed, where you put adverts, and how people are perceived to do things, and how targeting advertising, all those sorts of things can help you alter your perceptions. I think that's a really interesting thing as testers to kind of explore and understand.
The statistics are a thing, aren't they? Like that influence those things. For example, a telephone has 108 megapixels on its camera, so it must be better. But if it's got a rubbish lens, the quality of that picture is going to be rubbish, regardless of how many megapixels you throw at it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, that's where the marketing stuff gets in people's heads, and they suddenly think things are better because the numbers are bigger. It's an interesting one.
So ultimately, we haven't really managed to define quality, but we've talked about a lot of things that we look at in
Very
quality.
true.
I think that's the problem, though. There isn't any one definition of quality. I think we're all very much on the same page that it really does depend on the situation. Depends on what the customer wants, what we want, what the business needs, and all the other factors that we've talked about as well. I think
it's a challenge, therefore, as testers, as those of us who work in software, it's a challenge to just look to improve and meet needs and requirements, or seek out those needs and requirements in order to meet those things. How can we sort of, if we're looking towards the end of this interesting conversation, how can we look to achieve quality? Like, a lot of us have had quality in our job titles, and we talk about quality all the time, but how can we act in a quality way, or ensure that quality is something that goes through that? I know we're going to talk about quality culture later, don't worry, but are there any things, little tips at the end of this one, just as a little taster?
I think, to me, it's been open to feedback from wherever avenue it comes to help improve the quality perception, be it the quality of the code, be it the quality of the solution, be it the quality of the support, be it the quality of the marketing, or whatever it is. Being open and having the avenues to get that data, that feedback, be it word of mouth or any other mechanism you've got. I think we as testers need to listen and be the voice of that feedback to help give it some airtime, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say it's short feedback loops, the regular feedback, being able to challenge and question everything and actually say why, when we're trying to think of things from a customer perspective to certain levels. And if that's the case, we need to be able to challenge on the customer's behalf, or on the perspective of the customers, to make sure that we're building the right things in the right way, and we're thinking, is this something the customer is going to enjoy using, et cetera.
I'd agree with that. I think we need to act with integrity and make sure that we have the best interests of the end user and not try and cut corners.
Much like we do with this podcast.
We try to. And I guess my final point would be probably just on the lines of listen to the customers, listen to those of us who are working with the product or who care about the product, because if we don't think there's good quality in what we're working with, I've hammered this point home a few times, but if we've got concerns, we should listen to those and we should feel heard. And we should do the same for others, because credibility, respect, listening to people, it's important that we care about what we're working with if we really want to improve things.
Sage advice. Thank you, Chris. So on that note, it is now probably time that we say goodbye. So thank you very much for listening to Testing Peers tonight. And we've hoped you've enjoyed our conversation on quality. Obviously, we welcome your feedback on our quality and also just on everything else about us. If you want to get in contact with us, you can contact us at testingpeers.com, and we're available on most social media networks and places. I forgot what social media is called these days. Never mind. But thank you very much for joining us, and thank you once again to our sponsor, Saffron QA. We look forward to you listening in again in the future. Thank you.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.